My name is Beckett. I'm 34 years old, and the first thing you should know about me is that for 2 years I set other people's sentences in metal all day and could not bear to open the one book that still had my wife's pencil in the margins. I run a letterpress shop in Elder Falls, a village folded high into the Adirondacks where winter arrives early and overstays every welcome. And after Sylvie died, I let my life shrink down until it was about the size of that shop and no larger. The only thing that had carried the two of us through her illness was a shelf of novels by a writer I had never met, read aloud in a low voice beside her bed. And when she was gone, I kept the worn paperback she had loved to pieces and could not so much as lift the cover. Then a quiet, careful woman named Colette came to Elder Falls to bring the old newspaper archive back from the dead, and she walked into my shop needing the one thing I still knew how to do, and without either of us meaning it to, my life started turning over again like a cold press somebody had finally thought to oil. Let me tell you about the shop first, because the shop is where I hid. I print the old way, the slow way, with metal type set a single letter at a time. My trade lives in a wall of shallow drawers divided into small compartments that hold the sorts, the individual letters cast in lead, capitals up in the upper cases and small letters down in the lower. I build a line inside a composing stick balanced in my left hand, every character sitting backward and upside down, spacing the words out with thin blank slugs until the line locks up tight and true. Then I lock a page of those lines into an iron frame, ink the faces of the letters, and bring the paper down onto them under real weight, and the words come off the metal with a bite you can feel with your thumb on the back of the sheet. It is stubborn, unforgiving work that almost nobody wants anymore, and that suited me right down to the ground. A man who has quit believing in tomorrow can still believe in a straight line of type. The letters never once ask how you are holding up. They ask only that you set them true. I bought the shop from an old printer named Ambrose, the year before the bottom fell out of everything. He taught me the trade across the last winter he had in him, standing at my shoulder with hands gone too unsteady to set a line of his own, telling me the press would teach me patience, whether I asked it to or not. He was right about that. What neither of us guessed was how much patience I was going to need, or what for. Because I was not always a man who hid in a print shop. There was a whole life before the shop closed in around me, and the middle of that life was Sylvie. I met Sylvie when we were both too young to know what we were being handed, and I married her before I understood the size of it. She was a reader down to the marrow. The little apartment above the shop was more books than rooms, stacked up the stairs and sliding off the sills, and she read the way other people breathe, without ever noticing she was doing it. She used to read to me at night, out loud, because she said a good sentence was built to be heard and not only seen, and I would lie there in the dark and let her voice ferry me under. I was no reader myself back then. Sylvie set out to prove me wrong about that, patiently, one novel at a time, and she very nearly finished the job before her time ran out. She got sick in our 4th year. I am not going to lay the whole of it in front of you, because it belonged to her more than to me, but it was long. And it was the sort of illness that carries a person off by inches while they are still lying in the room beside you. Somewhere in the middle of it, on a night when neither of us could manage the pretense of sleep, she asked me to read to her for a change, instead of the other way around. She pressed a soft paperback into my hands, a novel called The Wintering Ground by a writer named Vivian Merrick, and she said, "This one, read me this one. I have been through it 4 times and I want to hear it in your voice while I still can." So I read it to her. And then I read the rest of them, every novel Vivian Merrick had ever published, over the months that came after, from a chair dragged up close to the bed, with the lamp turned low. I am not a graceful reader out loud, But those books did a thing for us that I still cannot name properly. They were about plain people in plain trouble, about small lives held up to the light until you saw they had never been small at all. And they said the things about love and leaving that I had no way of saying in my own voice. When she was too tired to talk, I read. When she woke frightened in the low hours, I read. Vivian Merrick, whoever she was, had written the words that hauled the pair of us across the worst thing that ever happened to me. I never met her, and for a long time I never thought of her as a living person at all. She was a name on a spine, and her sentences were the rope I kept hauling us along. Every one of those novels opened with the same short dedication, 2 words and a letter, for D. And I never gave it a moment's thought. It was just ink on the page ahead of the story, somebody's private business set down in a book that then belongs to strangers. Hold on to those 2 words anyway, for D. They come back around later, and they nearly took my legs out from under me when they did. Sylvie read her paperback of The Wintering Ground so many times that she wore the cover soft as old cloth, and she filled the margins. That is the part I need you to keep, because it matters at the end more than I could have known. She argued with the book in pencil. She underlined. She wrote yes out in the margin, and no, not like this, she wouldn't. And once, next to a paragraph near the end, she wrote, "This is the truest thing anyone ever told me." She wrote her whole reading self into the white space around the printed words, and when she died, that marked-up paperback was the most alive thing she left behind, more her than any photograph. And I could not open it. For 2 years, I could not open it. I kept it on the shelf above the press, the single book in a home full of books that I was not able to touch because her handwriting was inside it, and to lift the cover was to hear her voice again in a room her voice was never coming back to. So I did not lift it. I set strangers' words in metal, and I climbed the stairs at night into an apartment crowded with her books, and I made my life smaller and smaller until it fit inside 1 room and 1 row of type. And I told myself that was enough, because reaching for more had already cost me every last thing I had. That was the man Colette walked in on. I need you to see him clearly before I tell you the rest, because the rest turns into a love story, and it will be easy to forget that when it began I did not believe I had any love left in me to spend on anyone. She came in on a gray afternoon at the raw end of October, with a leather satchel hugged against her chest like something she was guarding. She was somewhere in her middle 30s, plainly dressed, dark hair pinned back without fuss, and she carried the stillness of a person who has trained herself to take up as little room in the world as she can. She said the county had hired her to sort out the old newspaper archive, the shuttered office of the Elder Falls Courier, which had printed its last edition long before either of us was born, and had sat locked and molding on Cross Street ever since. She said the building still held a job press and a room of old type gone stiff with damp, and that everyone she had asked had given her the same name, the one man left in the valley who still spoke that language, Beckett. I told her they had told her right, which is about as close to boasting as I get. She asked whether I would come and look, and give her an honest word on what could be brought back and what was past saving, and I heard myself say yes before I had thought it through, which had not happened to me in 2 years. Then, because she was looking at my cases of type with a hunger she was working to keep off her face, I made a joke. I told her, "Do not get your hopes up about me. I am not the clever one in this trade. I only set the words that braver people write." It was the kind of line I used to keep folks at a comfortable arm's length, and I expected her to smile and let it slide past. She did not let it slide. She went still in a different way than before, and she looked at me for a long moment, and she said, quietly, almost to herself, "Then somebody has to keep them alive." She said it the way you say a thing you have carried a long time, and I did not understand why a woman would put her whole chest into a sentence like that over a dead country newspaper and a room of ruined type. I only knew that the joke I had reached for to hold her at a distance had done the exact opposite, and that I wanted, past all sense, for her to keep standing in my shop and talking to me. I did not know, that afternoon, that I had just made that joke to Vivian Merrick's own face, about only setting the words that braver people wrote. That knowledge was a whole winter away, and it would knock me flat when it arrived. But that is the hinge the whole story swings on, so I am giving it to you now in order, so you can watch it come for me the way it came for me. I went to the Courier building that same week, and what I found in there just about broke my heart in the good way. A cast-iron job press under a canvas sheet, seized but whole. A wall of type cases, some ruined, a good deal of it salvageable. Galleys of old columns still locked in their frames, the last words the town had said before it gave up saying anything in print. A wedding, a hay auction, a boy home from a war. Colette stood in the middle of it with a clipboard she kept forgetting to write on, and I understood, watching her, that she did not see junk to be inventoried. She saw something nearer to a body that might be coaxed back to breathing. I knew that look. I had worn it myself, over an old press an old man left me. So we went to work, the two of us across that winter. I say the two of us. What actually happened was that I did the hands part, the cleaning and the freeing and the oiling and the lifting of seized type out of its beds, and she cataloged and sorted and could not stop herself from improving things that did not strictly need improving. Move that card. That heading is doing too much, cut it down. Let the column breathe. She had an eye for how words sit on a page that no county archivist had any business owning, a bone-deep feel for rhythm and space and the weight of a single line. And when I said so, she got flustered and told me she just read a great deal and changed the subject fast. I let her change it. In Elder Falls, we do not go prying at the parts of a person they keep folded out of sight. I of all men understood the arrangement. Still, there were things about Colette that did not add up, and I noticed them the way you notice a line of type standing a hair off its feet. Nothing you could point to, only a wrongness you can feel. She flinched barely, every time the talk drifted toward writers or books or the making of them. When old Harriet Sedge at the diner went on one morning about some famous novelist who had dropped clean out of the world years back, Colette got very interested in her coffee and did not say a word. She went by Colette, and a flat last name, Weir, that sat on her like a coat borrowed off a hook by the door. And once, when I asked her lightly whether she had ever wanted to write books herself instead of only saving the machines that printed them, something crossed her face that I can only call grief, and she said, "I tried that once. It cost more than I had to spend." And she would not give me a word more. Over that autumn, and into the first hard snows, Colette and I fell into a rhythm neither of us said out loud. The archive was the reason, and then it was the excuse. There was always one more press part to free, one more case to sort, and every job carried her across the green to my shop or carried me over to Cross Street, and every job ran longer than it needed to because we talked. Or I talked, and she listened in that complete way she had, and let slip pieces of herself so rarely that I learned to save each one like a coin, dropped in a jar. She had come from the city, needing somewhere quiet. She did not speak of family. She had rented the last house on Marrow Street, and months in, still had boxes she had not opened, and I did not push, because I was a man with a book he could not open, and I was in no position to judge another soul's sealed boxes. The nearest she came, that first winter, to letting me all the way in was one evening in the archive when the light had gone, and we were both too tired to keep working and neither of us wanted to leave. She was cleaning a font of old type with a rag and a can of solvent, one sort at a time, more tenderly than the job asked for. And without my prompting, she said she had once had a sister. She said the word and then went quiet around it. She said her sister had been the first reader of everything she ever cared about, since they were girls, that she wrote things and her sister read them, and that was the whole engine of it. And then she stopped, and I watched her decide not to finish, and I did not make her. I only said I was sorry, and that I knew a little about the kind of quiet a person leaves behind them. She looked at me then like I had said something rare, and she said, "Yes. You would, wouldn't you?" The night that changed everything happened in February, and it happened in my own kitchen, which is the last place I was braced for it. I had finally worked up the nerve to cook a person a supper. It sounds like nothing. For me, it was a cliff. I had not had anyone up those stairs since Sylvie, and I spent the whole afternoon telling myself it did not mean what it plainly meant. Colette came up out of the cold with snow still in her hair, and while I banged pans around in the little kitchen, she drifted along the shelves the way readers cannot help but do, running one finger down the spines. And she found the book. Sylvie's own copy of The Wintering Ground, worn soft as cloth, the one I had not been able to open in 2 years, standing on the shelf above the others where I kept it like a stone I could not lift and could not put down. By the time I came in wiping my hands, she had it open in both of hers, and the color had gone straight out of her face, and she was staring down at a dead woman's pencil crowded into the margins of a novel, and she was shaking. Not weeping, not yet. Shaking, the way the ground shakes a moment before you hear the sound that goes with it. I thought I had heard her somehow. I set the plates down and crossed to her and said her name, and she looked up at me with an expression I had never seen her wear, and she asked, in a voice scraped down to almost nothing, "Whose writing is this?" And I told her. I said that was Sylvie's book, that my wife had read it to rags and filled the margins across 4 times through, that it was the most of her I had left, and I had not been able to lift the cover since the day she died. And Colette read Sylvie's notes. All of them. She turned the pages slowly. The yes and the no, not like this. She wouldn't, and the this is the truest thing anyone ever told me. And she wept the way I had not let myself weep in 2 years, standing in my kitchen over another woman's handwriting. I did not understand a bit of it, but I put my arms around her, because whatever it was real, and I had gone longer than I knew how to measure without holding another living person. She said only one strange thing that night, and it lodged in me. She ran her thumb very lightly over Sylvie's pencil, the way you would touch a sleeping child, and she said, almost too quiet to catch so it reached someone. It was real to someone after all. She said it like a person coming up out of deep water and taking the first full breath. I asked what she meant. She shook her head and said never mind, that she was tired. And she went home early into the snow, and I stood at the window and watched her go, and thought I had never wanted so badly to understand another person all the way down. I would like to tell you, I was quick about what came next. I was not. The truth had been standing in front of me for months, patient as type in a case, and I read every letter of it wrong until I could not anymore. It came apart slowly, over the back half of that winter, one small thing at a time. The first was the line. There is a place near the end of The Wintering Ground where Sylvie had written, hard, no, not like this. She wouldn't say it so flat. I had read that page aloud to my dying wife and never thought the sentence odd. One afternoon in the archive, I had the book with me, and I read that marked page to Colette, meaning only to share the strange grace of Sylvie arguing with a novel. And Colette, without looking up from the type she was cleaning, said the line back to me. Not the printed line. The other one, the way Sylvie and her pencil had insisted it should have gone, word for word, as if she were reading it off a page only she could see. I asked how she could know that. She went very still, and she said an editor had changed it years ago over the writer's objection, and that the writer had always believed a reader would feel the seam even if she never knew it was there. And your wife felt it, she said. Your wife was right. The second thing was the dedication, for D. I had read it 100 times and never asked. But I had the whole shelf of Vivian Merrick's novels by then, Sylvie's copies, and one snowbound evening, I took them down and opened each to its dedication page, and they all said the same 2 words, for D. Every book but the last one she ever published, and that one said for D, who did not get to read this one. And I sat there on the floor of the room that was still full of her books, those novels open around me, and thought about a woman in my archive who had once had a sister, who had been the first reader of everything, who was gone now, and I felt the ice give way under my feet. The third thing was her hand. I had watched Colette write out hundreds of little catalog cards for the archive by then, in a careful, upright pencil, and I had watched her, more than once, correct a line of old newspaper copy right in the margin of a proof, the way a person does when the habit is older than they are. And one evening, I laid Sylvie's paperback on the table between us, open to the page where my wife had written, "This is the truest thing anyone ever told me." And beside it, I set a card Colette had lettered that afternoon, and I looked from the one hand to the other. It was not that they matched, because they did not. It was that the arguing was the same. The impulse to reach into the white space and answer the words was the same in both of them, in the reader and in the writer. And I understood, all at once and far too late, that they had been in a kind of conversation for years without ever meeting. My dead wife in the margins and the living woman across my table who had written the very line she was arguing with. I did not accuse her. It was not that kind of knowing. I waited until we were in the archive on a quiet evening with the old Courier press between us, and I said her name, and I said, "Colette, I know who you are." I said it as gently as I have ever said anything. I said, "You are Vivian Merrick. You wrote The Wintering Ground. You wrote every book my wife loved to pieces. You wrote the words I read to her while she was dying, and you have stood in my shop all winter letting me call myself the dull one to your face, and you never said." She did not deny it. She sat down slowly on the printer's stool as if her legs had quit, and she put her face in her hands. And when she looked up, she was not the careful, folded-away woman I had met in October. She was somebody who had been found, and underneath the fear of it there was, I promise you, something that looked almost like relief. She told me the whole of it that night, in the cold of the Courier building with the one lamp going. She was Vivian Merrick, yes, though that had only ever been a name she wrote under, a fence between the books and herself. She had written her first novel in a rented room at 26, and she had gone on writing 4 novels, then 5 into her 30s, and every one of them had been in the truest place for her sister, Delphine, the D, of every dedication. Her younger sister, 6 since childhood, who had been Colette's first and best and only necessary reader, the one person she was ever really writing to. Colette wrote and Delphine read, and that was the engine, that was the whole of why the words ever came. The books were only ever letters to her sister, with the names changed. And then Delphine died. She just died, worn all the way out at last, and she took the reason with her when she went. Colette finished the book she had been writing while it happened, the one that says for D, who did not get to read this one, and sent it out into the world. And then she sat down to begin the next one, and there was nobody on the other end of it. She said, I picked up the pen and understood that I had been writing to one person my whole life, and she was not there to read it, and the words simply stopped. Not slowed. Stopped like a press with the belt cut through. She tried for 2 years. She said every sentence she managed after Delphine died felt like talking out loud in an empty house. And in the end, she could not stand the sound of her own voice, and she quit. She let the name Vivian Merrick go dark. She let the world assume whatever it liked, that she had dried up or lost her nerve or vanished. And the world, which forgets fast, obliged her and moved on. She had come to Elder Falls to disappear on purpose. To be nobody in a place where nobody had ever heard the name Vivian Merrick, and to find out whether there was a person left underneath the rider at all. The archive was penance and hiding both. She could keep other people's words alive, dead columns from a dead newspaper, because that asked nothing of her but care. It was the making of new ones she could not face. She said, "I told you the truest thing about myself the first day, in your shop. Somebody has to keep them alive. I meant that I could not make them anymore. I meant I had turned into a keeper, because I had stopped being able to be a maker. I did not think you had heard it." And I said I heard it. I just did not know yet that you were handing me your whole life in a single sentence. And then the thing that had been coming for me all winter finally landed, all at once, and with my full weight behind it. Because it was her. The words I had hauled Sylvie and myself across the dark with. The sentences I read low beside a dying bed. The page my wife marked as the truest thing anyone ever told her. All of it had come out of the exhausted, frightened woman on the printer's stool in front of me, who had spent years believing her words had never truly reached a single living soul, that they had gone out into the world and vanished the same way she had. And she had stood in my kitchen in February and read a dying stranger's pencil in the margins of her own novel. This is the truest thing anyone ever told me, and understood, too late and all at once, that they had reached someone. That it had been real to someone. That a woman she would never meet had held one of her sentences up in the dark like a lamp, and found her way by it to the end. I told her so, I had to. I said the book that carried my wife out of her fear was yours. The page she marked was yours. I have been reading your words for 3 years, without once thinking of the person who wrote them as somebody who could be hurt or need anything from anyone. And she started to cry again, and she said, "That is why I could not tell you." How do you tell a man that the thing that saved him was made by a woman who cannot save herself? And we sat there in a room full of dead newspaper type, holding the strangest fact I have ever held, which was that she had written the words, and I had built my whole life around words, and my dead wife had married the two of us together in pencil in the margins of a paperback years before either of us knew the other was breathing. She wanted to leave. I could see it come over her, the way you see weather come over a ridge. Leaving was the thing that had always worked for her, the way hiding was the thing that had always worked for me, and here we both were, each an expert in the one wrong answer. She said I should not have let this happen. I do not get to have this. I gave up the part of me that could love a thing and not lose it. And that, in the end, was what I had to say to her, and it was the hardest thing I have ever said, because I had to say it to myself first and mean it. I told her I had run too. I had not gone anywhere, but I had run all the same, into one room and one row of type and a book I could not open, and I had called it keeping myself safe, and it was not safe, it was only small. I told her she could pack the boxes she had never unpacked and drive to some other frozen nowhere, and be some third name, and the grief would ride along in the passenger seat the whole way, because the only thing that ends that hunt is turning around and letting it catch you. And then I said the thing I had been carrying since February without knowing it. I said, you told me somebody has to keep the words alive. Your sister is gone. She is not coming back to read them. But you were never writing to a dead woman, Colette. You were writing to the reader, whoever she turned out to be. And she turned out to be my wife, in a chair in the dark at the very end of her life. And your words did the one thing you were most afraid they never did. Do not set the pen down because one reader left the room. The room is fuller than you think. She was quiet a long time. The lamp ticked. The snow came down past the black windows of the old newspaper office. And then she asked me for paper. I want to be careful here, because this is the part the world would want me to make bigger than it was, and its whole beauty is that it was not big. She did not write a novel that night. She wrote a paragraph. One paragraph by hand at the Macready table, crossing out, starting over, the way I had watched her clean a single sort of type as if it were the only one in the world. And when she finished, she did not show it to me. She folded it once and held it in her lap, and she said, "It is not for anyone. It is just to see whether I still can." And I said that was the only reason worth doing it. And I meant it, because I knew the difference between making a thing for the world and making a thing because you are alive. And it is Tuesday, and the snow is coming down. She wrote a little more the next week, and a little more the week after. Not for a publisher. There was no publisher waiting, no one counting the days, no one who so much as knew where Vivian Merrick had gone, and that turned out to be the mercy of it rather than the loss. She wrote the way a person learns to walk again after a long illness, badly at first and then less badly. She wrote for herself, and once, I think, for her sister, and once or twice, though she never said so, I believe she wrote for me. The words came back to her slowly, over that spring, in a town where not one living soul wanted a thing from her but her company, next to a man who set her sentences in metal, because he could not think of a better way to tell her what she had become to him. I did finally open Sylvie's book all the way. Colette and I opened it together, on a night in April with the ice going off the river loud enough to hear through the walls, and we read Sylvie's margins out loud to each other, every one of them, the whole reading self of the woman I had loved arguing and underlining in the white space around the words of the woman I was learning slowly to love next. And it was not the terrible thing I had braced against for 2 years. It was the opposite. It was 3 people in one small room who had found each other across the words on a page, 2 of us living and 1 gone on ahead, and Sylvie's pencil turned out to be not a wound after all but a bridge. This is the truest thing anyone ever told me, set down by a dying woman in the margins of a book whose author was sitting beside me with her hand in mine. Colette said Sylvie would have liked her. I said Sylvie sent her. I more than half believe it to this day. We did not hurry what came after. We were 2 people who had each been scooped hollow and were learning by inches how to be filled back up, and we went at it carefully, the way you set a hard line of type, 1 letter at a time, true or not at all. But there came an evening late in my shop, with ink dried on both our hands, when she looked up from the Macready table, and I quit pretending I was only her printer, and I kissed her once quietly in the lamplight with the presses sleeping around us, and it was the first thing in 2 years that felt less like getting through the day and more like being alive inside it. That is as much of that as I will tell you. It was a kiss, and it was quiet, and it was the whole world. She wrote a book again, in the end, though not for a long while and never in any hurry. It grew over 2 slow years, up in the apartment above the shop and at the tall stool by my type cases, and she wrote it the way she had cleaned that first font of type, tenderly and for its own sake. When it was done, she did a thing that made me put down my composing stick and turn my face away so she would not see what it did to me. She let me print the first copy. Not a publisher, not the world, not first. Me on the old press Ambrose left me, 1 true copy pulled by hand on good paper, her words bitten into the sheet under real weight, before another living person had read a line of it. And when I handed her that first page, still smelling of ink, she read it, and she looked at me and she said, "You were never only the man who sets the words." And I said, "And you were never only the woman who wrote them. Somebody has to keep them alive." She never disappeared a second time, and she never once performed, and she kept the one life she wanted with both hands. I have thought a great deal since about margins, about the white space a writer leaves around the words on purpose, the part that is meant for the reader. For 2 years, I believed my own life had shrunk to exactly that, to nothing, to the blank margin around a story that was already finished. The man who inked what braver people wrote and went home to a book he could not open. I was wrong about that. In every way a man can be wrong. The margin is not the empty part. The margin is where the reader lives. It is where Sylvie wrote herself into a novel so completely that she was still teaching me, years after she was gone, that words are only rope until somebody on the far end takes hold and pulls. It is where a hollowed-out writer read a dead stranger's pencil and remembered why she had ever picked up a pen. It is where two frightened people who had each decided that vanishing was the safe move found out that the brave move, the only move, is to stay in the room and let yourself be read. Colette taught me that grief will keep you riding to an empty house until you understand the house was never empty, that the words go on reaching people you will never meet in rooms you will never see. And Sylvie taught me from the margins that a small life lived true is not small at all, that 30 feet of typecases and one worn paperback and one quiet kiss with ink on both our hands can be the whole of a life, and plenty. I used to joke that I only set the words that braver people wrote. I know better now. Somebody has to keep them alive. It turns out that is not a small job. It turns out that is the only job there ever was. She wrote the words that saved me before she ever knew my name, and I spent my whole life setting words in metal, without once imagining that the woman who made them might one day walk in out of the snow needing to be saved herself. And we found each other anyway, in the margins in a mountain town, in the white space we had each been told did not count. And I would set that line and lead 1,000 times over, backward and upside down and true, to say it once more somewhere it might last. Would you have believed the person whose words saved you could need saving too?